We now have the pleasure of being joined by a very, very special recurring guest, not his first time here on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. It's the head coach of the Virginia men's lacrosse team, Lars Tiffany. Coach, how are you doing on this Wednesday morning?
Doing really well. Excited to be with you two, and excited about talking about lacrosse, especially Syracuse and Virginia lacrosse. Two programs that have gone toe to toe since the late '90s when Desco and Starja said, "Hey, let's get this going," and now it happens obviously permanently because now we're both in the ACC.
What's this time of the season like for you guys? It's late April, regular season's winding down, getting ready for the postseason. What are these last few weeks like?
Yeah, it's certainly an exciting time. Playing ACC games is the best. Playing these interconference games, and last year was a blip, right? When the ACC was down, and it was that's like the 50-year storm, and so we're back to where it should be. Three of us are in the top three. Carolina's on the edge of the top 10, and Syracuse is one of the best teams in the country right now, the way they're playing. And so this is what ACC lacrosse is all about. And so it's a really exciting time. I think a lot of us, all the programs, you're a little tired, you're a little beat up, but you tend to not have as many injuries. It's interesting, we get those injuries early in the year, and by now you're a little more hardened, seasoned, to steal the firewood term. And you're just a bit more, ready to take those slashes and bumps and bruises. And so it's a bit of attrition. But I think our team is in a good place physically and health wise, and hopefully getting healthier.
You mentioned you guys are hardened in season. You guys play a really hard schedule. You guys have 3 losses on the year, 2 to number 2 Duke and another one to number 3 Maryland. What has the year been like playing those highly ranked teams, getting a win against Notre Dame, but also losing twice to Duke and losing a close one to Maryland?
Yeah, first of all, we created a schedule that we knew would be just about the toughest schedule in the country. It's by absolutely the hardest schedule I've ever faced as a coach, and certainly the hardest one that Virginia has faced in many years. And that was intentional. We knew we had a really good team this year, and then some of, like I was just saying, the ACC is back to normal, if not a little higher than normal, But and so we knew we were going to be a team that had a chance to to be able to take on this type of challenges. And a couple of years from now, if we feel differently, then we'll change the schedule. But this was something that the men really wanted. Sometimes you're trying to get up for some of the games that aren't ACC and are not a highly ranked opponent. And the men would tell me, "Hey, look, it's hard to get up for these games." And some years I'm like, "Well, hey, we got to balance the schedule here." And other years I'm like, "Okay, fine. I'll get rid of those games. You better be up for every game now, because this is what it's going to be like, a gauntlet." And playing an ACC game 6 straight weekends, along with Maryland at the beginning of that, stretch. That's it's been a fun stretch, and an exciting stretch, and one you got to check your ego at the door, because it's almost impossible to go undefeated against this type of schedule. It's impossible to go undefeated anyways. I mean, what Maryland did last year was amazing. And so it's a part of the growth process. It's going through these challenges. And again, what it allows us to do is really understand ourselves. And if we continually grow and innovate and be creative and find new ways to get things done, then we will improve as a program in the race to improve, which we use that phrase all the time around here. The season is a race to improve. And, and if we don't, then we'll lose to somebody who is innovating, growing, being creative. And that'll be a painful lesson.
Speaking of innovating, over the last few years, you guys have been one of the top programs really in the country, won 2 of the last 3 national titles. But now here in 2023, it's the third season post the 2020 season being canceled because of COVID. How has this season been different from 2021 and 2022, coming out of COVID restrictions, all that kind of stuff? How has this year been different for you being able to coach, maybe back to normal before the pandemic?
Sure. Yeah, 21 was haphazard, trying to understand how we're going to navigate the COVID protocols and, 3 buses to some games. I think we took 3 buses to Syracuse in 21 when we played up there, and one of them broke down. So luckily we had 2 buses so we could squeeze everybody on, and violated some COVID protocols, obviously. But I don't know. For me, 22 was kind of back to normal. I felt like we got into the swing of things, and yeah, but it's it is starting to become a bit of a memory, a bit of something like, oh yeah, we used to have to do crazy things like that. But more to your question, what happened against Duke this past weekend, where we were down by 7 at one point, and it had a really strong second half, started bringing me back to the 2019 Virginia Cavalier team that we had that was on its way up, but we were very fortunate. We won every overtime game we were in. We were in 5 of them. We were down 3-4 in one game, 5 goals in the second half, and won those games. And what I saw this past Saturday against Duke gave me some flashbacks to the 19 team. That 19 team, led by Ryan Conrad, Mikey Herring, along with Krause and Aiken and Jared Connors and many great others. That was a team that was sort of all in, and like you could say jumping how high, and that team would just lay in traffic for each other. They were going to do whatever you asked, and they were desperate to get Virginia back to the upper echelon. And they just wouldn't quit. They flat out wouldn't quit. The 21 team was a little different. We had some chemistry issues. We still won the title in the end, but it was a different type of dynamic. It was a different makeup, different chemistry. And we got really hot in May. And so I'm looking at this 23 version saying, okay, I'm starting to see some signs of that 19 team, which again, we still lost that game in Durham, 15-14, but there's some things there that are really encouraging to me that I really like, that we've turned the corner emotionally and we're ready to brawl and fight, and for every last second of the game.
A roster specific question. Xander Dixon's improvements from last year. He's already have more goals, assists, and points this year. He played offensive midfield last year, now at attack this year. What has been the key kind of to his offensive explosion this season comparative to last?
Sure. Yeah. A lot of it has to do with Connor Schellenberger. But Xander's, I'll admit, he's one of those men that our opponents always thought really highly of. And maybe we should have been playing him more before now. Like the game would end and I would talk to somebody like, boy, number 10. I'm like, really? Well, what about Schellenberger? What about Matt Moore? What about Jared Connors? They'd be talking about 10. We were trying to still think about him as a midi in the preseason, in the fall, because we really wanted Griffin Schutz to be an attackman. We liked the idea of the 2-headed quarterback. You see right now with Syracuse, Spallina is the quarterback at X, but Kirst, he's doing a lot of hard charging and hard dodging. That was sort of the formula that we were striving for, is to have Schutz be like Kirst. And then Cormier and Hiltz, 2 Canadians lefties, the analogy is pretty simple there. But Xander was just scoring so many goals in practice and finding openings, and Schellenberger loves looking for him and Cormier, that we decided, okay, you know what, we got to go to a 1 quarterback system and put Schutz back up to the midfield line. And so it's really Xander just continuing to evolve, and he is a slippery banana. That guy, he just finds space, and the quickness of his release, it's different. It's unique. And there's almost nobody like him. But I will tell you, getting ready for Syracuse, there are some guys in that team, 23, Finn Thompson, 9, Jackson Birtwistle, who they remind me a lot of what we do as Xander. And it makes me nervous. Like, you just can't leave Xander open. And there's a bunch of guys in Syracuse you can't leave there. Can't let them have their hands free, And free doesn't mean you're 5 yards off them. You could be 1 yard off them, but they've got that stick showing. And so it's a really, really talented group offensively this year for Syracuse.
I don't know if I've ever heard the phrase slippery banana before, but I think that is a perfect way to describe what your guys' attack has been like. You mentioned Schellenberger, you mentioned Cormier, but what about Thomas McConvey, who you guys brought in from Vermont? What has he added to the attack, especially with his connection to Peyton Cormier?
Exactly. They've got that two-man game. They've been doing it since middle school with Mimico. They're fantastic on that left side. They do a little seal slip play that we saw DeMeo and Wisnauskas do really well with Maryland last year. You know, McConvey, Cormier. It's they've got a nice little combination there. And then sometimes we do a little three-man, some sort of nations pick play. We add Patrick McIntosh to the mix. But yeah, Thomas McConvey is a really nice player, and we're very fortunate to have his services for a year. He draws the poll. He draws a lot of attention. His scoring is not as high as it was certainly in Vermont, because there's other players he's been deferring to, and that's what's great about it. He's been quite unselfish. He's not coming here to score 1,000 goals. He was willing to take a role. Fortunately, he was a midi at Vermont, which always to me was counterintuitive. Here's this left-handed, goal scorer, number one pick in the NL draft from Canada. Of course, he's an attackman. No, he's a midi, but that makes it easier to blend in for 1 year, and only 1 year when he's gone. It's when you do this transfer portal acquisition process, you're looking for the best talent, but you got to make sure it fits and the chemistry and where would they find that role? And certainly being a midfielder, it's easier to accept because he's not stealing someone's playing time who's on the field the whole game. But that's how Thomas wants. He likes being a midfielder. He's very good at midfield. He can run the field fairly well. And boy, he's a heck of a shooter.
You mentioned the transfer portal. Something Syracuse is trying to rebuild is the sustainable part of their program where they can compete year in, year out. You guys have done that at Virginia through high school recruiting, player development, and the transfer portal, as we just saw with Thomas McConvey. How do you balance the two, and how do you kind of build that sustainable program where you can compete for national championships year in, year out?
You're right. And it's a very pertinent question, how you balance it. I don't know if I have the right exact answer because year in, year out would be different, but that's the question. That exact question you just asked is a question we keep asking ourselves. How do you balance it? Because every year, and it's right about now, you start hearing rumblings. Hey, so-and-so is going to jump in the transfer portal May 5th when the season ends. Because the 45-day window is coming up here soon, starting at the selection show Sunday. That next Monday, that next day, bam, there'll be a bunch, that window opens for 45 days. And there's some really good ball players already in the transfer portal, and there's going to be a lot jumping in then. And then they've got 45 days to do it. Some will wait till the NCAA tournament's over, yada, yada. It's a bad analogy, but it's like you already have a girlfriend, and then you see a really, really cute girl, and she says she's interested in you. And you're like, oh God, but I really like my girlfriend. And how many girlfriends can you have? And so you look at that transfer portal, and there's so many good looking ball players and guys, and you see their stats, proven collegiate stats, and not just Division I. Some of these Division III guys are great. And so you see these stats, and it's like, I'm not guessing on a 16-year-old. This is proof. And before all this transfer portal stuff, used to be the only proof I had statistically used to be junior A boxer cross. If you're 17 years old and you've been playing junior A for a year or two, and you're scoring 30 goals, I don't even need to see you play. It's like what we saw with Moneyball and the Oakland A's with they were the first to really just go statistically driven and show the value of players based on stats from the minor leagues. Well, the difference between playing in Syracuse versus playing in Idaho high school lacrosse. It's hard to compare those stats. So, but anyways, I digress. So looking at that transfer portal, we're looking, we're definitely looking, but it's like trying to temper yourself. So we don't bring in 12 or 15 like a couple programs do. Can we bring in? And I'll admit, I changed. At first, I was bringing in one. I was like, we're just bringing in one. We're going to stay true to our recruiting process. Development of the 16, 17-year-old, get here as 18, continue to make them a better player, and have this trust with them and their family that we are all in behind them. And I'll admit, we've started adding to 2 to 3. We've gotten to that 3 levels, this past year, just felt like, wow, look what Maryland has done. Look how strong you can build a team. If this is how good you could be pre-transfer portal explosion era, now the top level teams are here. I don't know if we can keep the same model. We saw that with college football, Dabo Sweeney, right? Like Clemson wasn't going to do it. Maybe there were some other reasons. When you lose a couple of premier quarterbacks over an 8-year period there, right? All of a sudden, who is the next quarterback? But I think that was an example for me from college football. Like, well, maybe Dabo needs to go to the transfer portal, but maybe Lars, we got to do more than one. So long answer because I guess I don't have a definitive answer to the question, because we're asking the same question, Jordan. How do you balance this? And it's already starting to happen. There's a couple guys in the portal now that my assistants are like, Coach, this guy's really good. I'm like, yeah, but isn't our second midfielder so-and-so really good too? Do we upset the apple cart here? If he's good enough, if we're going to put blood in the water, then it better be worth it.
It's a delicate balance, and I'm sure you're not the only coach and coaching staff dealing with the balance of high school recruiting versus the transfer portal. But bringing you back to Saturday, this will only be your third time going head-to-head against Gary Gates since he's become the head coach at Syracuse. Is that difficult to prepare for because you've only faced Gary and his staff a couple of times? Or it's still the same players that Syracuse has had the last few years, so that doesn't make it difficult, plus having the entire season on film, having already played 13 games helps out that a lot, or is it more difficult?
It's difficult in the sense that they're very different from last year. Last year was certainly Gary's first season, but it should be wiped out. I want my first season wiped out here. We were barely 500 my first year here in Charlottesville, with Sean and Kip. And it's a growth. Honestly, I understood what Gary Gate went through because of my first year here. And you've heard that saying, when there's a new boss or a new head coach, a new leader, it's going to get worse before it gets better. And I've always heard that. And I always thought that was a good excuse for losing. I was like, that's what losers say. But having gone through it, and I was going through it at the same time, Bronco Mendenhall, who was in his first year as a head coach here for UVA football, he was going through it too. And he went 2-10 in his first year in 2016 that fall, and then proceeded to build this football program up to an appearance in the Orange Bowl. And I think 2 wins over SEC teams in bowl games, or at least a win in a really close performance against Florida. But so I get the fact that, and now I can understand it, because I'm like, what if Gary Gates shows up last year, or I show up, or Bronco Mendenhall shows up, and all of a sudden you're winning 75% of your games, you're in a bowl game, you're in an LSBA tournament. It's really easy to say, for the players within the locker room to say, you know what? I knew it was a coach. I knew it was, we just needed a better coach. I knew it. Well, if you don't have a great first year, like we didn't, now you can go to the guys after year one. Okay, do you think you need a new coach? Do you think it's the coach's fault? Or maybe we got to look in the mirror. Maybe we got to change some behaviors on Saturday night and Thursday night. Maybe it's the guys in the locker room. And so it allowed us to get a transformation in mindset. I said, well, we can replace the coaching staff again. They could get rid of us after 1 year, or we got to change. And so we did some things. We started practicing on Sundays, and Mondays off, and it just made a different attitude on Saturday nights, and the preparation was much more professional. And so I feel like what's the benefit of what Gary and Dave Petramala and Coach March went through last year is they could get more buy-in from their men. And now they've actually changed their roster too. When you asked your question, it's very similar, very similar preparing from last year. It's actually totally different. Obviously, Spallina, really highly touted recruit, and he's proving it right away. Owen Hill's back. We didn't see him last year. And then Kirst, boy, what a dynamic he's brought forward, going from midfield and not playing attack. And then some other young blood on offense there with Simmons and Thompson and Leo and Roa. I mean, gosh, who's you look at last year's scouting report to this year's scouting report, and I guess Jackson Burtwhistle scored 5 goals against us last year, and Griffin Cook, who cooked us a few times in 21. So It's very different roster offensively, and then obviously at the other end of the field, they got one of the best goalies in the country making a ton of saves for him in front of an improving defense. I could also feel for Coach Petramala last year. My first year, I run the defense. It was like a new language, a foreign language. You're trying to put in a new system, and every time you take those 2 steps forward, it's like climbing Mount Everest. You take a step back, and because they're comprehension, but they don't really truly know it. And so they do the slide, but not the second part of the slide. And all of a sudden someone's wide open. And what we're seeing is now in their second year with Coach Petramala, the defense has gotten, more stout and stalwart. So it's a rapidly improving program. And so give credit to that coaching staff.
You mentioned the star players on both sides, obviously the offense, Burt Whistle, Leo, Spallina, Kirst, and then on the other side, the improving defense and Womark. What specifically would be one key to the game on Saturday that you guys have to do to get the win down in Charlottesville?
Don't let Syracuse touch the ball that much. It's just watching them offensively, and holy cow, 35 man-up goals. I don't know what the record is for man-up goals, but without knowing, could they have already broken it? I mean, we haven't even been man-up 35 times. They have 35 man-up goals. So, the keys for us is just don't let Syracuse touch the ball. That's our best defense. And so Peter LaSala, we have a veteran face-off specialist who can also score some goals. His play is going to be really critical against Johnny and Jack in there. And so it's so that'll be a big part. We would like a physical game. Syracuse likes a physical game. They're playing with the edginess and the character of Gary Gate and the rest of the coaches. It's how physical do we want it to be? Do we want to be man down 7 times? I don't know, against a team that's scoring 57.4% of the time a man up and looks really comfortable slinging a ball around. So those are some of the keys is we got to possess the ball. We're going to play fast. We're not slowing anything down, but we got to win those extra possessions off the faceoff X and those loose balls on the ground. We got to shoot well, not a lot of weaknesses in that Will Mark. And then we just got to keep our head. Like I say, we're going to have some penalties. We're going to have some penalties of aggression. We just got to make sure we don't get those extra penalties of going off sides, too many face-off violations. Those penalties that are just sort of a mental mistake. We'll take the physical mistakes. We'll take the aggression, but that's where we got to keep it, like being man down. Can we keep it around 3 times as opposed to 6 times because of mental mistakes?
Coach, can't thank you enough for your generous time. Really, really appreciate you speaking with us here before Syracuse and Virginia get going on Saturday. That's Lars Tiffany. Thanks so much, Coach.
Oh, it's wonderful to be on the show with you, Ethan and Jordan. Thank you.